What's up? What's up? What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode two of
The more you know,
Monday. I don't know, I can't get that out sometimes.
Well, the more you know, everyone knows that logo and slogan and everything. The more you know. Actually, we got to make a Shelby shirt that says "The More You Know" Monday.
I'm gonna make us up a logo.
I'll get one, man.
And we'll do some shirts. So welcome, everybody. My name is Shelby. This is
Jeff from Hard to Come By.
And we are happy to be here tonight and happy for you guys to join us. So every week we try to bring a new topic, a little bit about comic history or comic news or anything like that. And tonight's going to be a great show. We're going to talk about the direct market and how that came to be. So a little bit of history of that. And anything you want to jump in there? Hello, Max. Hello, Captain Ramus.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, for joining us in the live chats right now. Yeah, this is our second episode now. So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun kind of diving into these topics with you and learning so much about it. You know, obviously, growing up, collecting comics and being involved in the industry for a while, you hear bits and pieces of a lot of this stuff. And to see it all kind of actually put together and do the research on it and see really how everything started is just really interesting. And then actually that translates then into, what comics could be worth more money and how to look for certain things a little bit more. We tried to kind of set this whole series up almost like a chronological order of events. But the more we started digging into it, the more we're like, well, this is going to be more than an hour if we do all this. And we start breaking it apart. We want to try and keep these from, 30 minutes to an hour if we can. So we're going to actually bounce around a little bit chronologically just because we pulled some things apart. So we'll be going from 70s and 80s and 90s, then we'll do some 60s stuff. So we bounce around a little bit. But it's been a lot of fun, and I couldn't ask for a better co-host. So Shelby, thank you much.
Hey, same here. I've been looking around for months for someone, and thank you, Max. Yeah, go get some more people, bring them in here. But yeah, I've been looking around for someone, and like I brought it up to you, then you started getting details with me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I love. I love this. I love it. So, so you got to do something that not a lot of us has got to do in a while, which was go to a show this past week. How was that?
I didn't get to go.
What?
I was all set. I was going to meet a bunch of people from our community. I was going to meet Southern down there. I had my Jeep problem. So the transmission on my Jeep went out. And then I was supposed to get it back on Friday. I'm like, okay, I get it back on Friday. I can still go Saturday and Sunday. Be cool. Catch all up. Got it back on Friday. Saturday, check engine light came back on. Transmission was gone again. So I had to drop it back off again. So I still don't have a vehicle. So I couldn't make it down there. So
you had told me Friday you was getting the Jeep back, so I thought you had went, and I thought some of the pictures you were sending me was like, oh, cool, he's found these books at the convention that we can use for talking points at the show and stuff, here in the show. But all right,
it's frustrating. The first show of the year, and in such a long time, and watching everyone else's, IG, feeds, and they're down there.
Going crazy. They're going nuts. All right. Well, cool. Well, the first thing I think we're going to do is we're going to get started with not really a recap, but some people had some questions, and I'm playing a little video here. All right.
I love that, man. I love the Batman homage there.
So updates and viewer comments. So you got a few comments or questions about the Mark Jewelers, didn't you?
Yeah, our first episode was on Mark Jewelers. Got a couple of questions on that. I'm still following up on some of those. So again, I appreciate everyone who watched live with us and answered the questions on the live stream. And then people hit me up afterwards saying, hey, I got a couple of questions. I'm still looking for some answers on those. But there is one particular one I wanted to bring up with everyone that I personally didn't know. And Shelby, I know you knew about it. So that's the problem that went around, I guess maybe a few years ago. And I should have known this could have happened, because anytime you talk about money and ways to increase money and dollar values, there's going to be people that try and like bypass that system and do what they can to make a little bit more money. So what happened, and this is from J1, my boy J1 on Instagram, he brought this up to me. He does a lot of good specking, so everyone can check him out as well. But he actually heard from one of his buddies that he wanted a Mark jeweler. So he went to the dealer and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a Mark jeweler," and I forgot which issue it was. Yeah. And he said, "Well, I don't have that, but I can put a Mark jeweler in there for you. You tell me the issue you want, and I'll put a Mark jeweler in. It's no big deal." So I didn't know that, and obviously that when you're talking about finding the staples to line up exactly right and everything, it should be pretty obvious that it's not a Mark Jewelers, but we know a lot of people nowadays are just buying it because they want the name Mark Jeweler on there, and they're not really even cracking it open. So I can see some issues if someone buys it, thinks they're getting something a little bit more rare, that less than 5% that we're talking about in the print runs. They submit it to CGC, and it's going to come back with that green label or something on there. So yeah, it's a problem. And Shelby, you want to talk a little bit more about it, because I know you dealt with it a little bit more.
No, I was just going to reiterate the same thing you said was, there are some key books that are Mark Jewelers, like the first Punisher appearance. I think there's some Mark Jewelers out there. I don't know any Hulk 181s, but just the printing process. You mentioned that it should be kind of obvious. One, if anybody's ever tried to pull apart these staples and put them back appropriately, it is almost impossible. And then second, these books are folded, a long string of them, and then a knife comes down and slices
paper cutter
apart. So the Mark Jeweler is going to be, apparently even with the book, right? And no two books are going to be 100% identical. So I think if you try to take a Mark Jeweler from another book and from one book and put it into another, you're going to have maybe some misalignment issues. Like, for example, this book has misstapled. So see, the staples are more towards the front cover. So if you were to try to take the Mark Jeweler out of this book, which is only about a $20 book with a Mark Jeweler, and put it into, say, first appearance of Punisher, then, that'd be almost impossible. So, just kind of keep your eye out. And I think if you are, keyed into that, then you'd be able to see that. So
no, definitely. And and apparently Max is cooking everyone dinner, so anyone in the chat's getting free dinner. So Max, thank you much, appreciate that.
Well, Max, for cooking us dinner, here's a video for you.
You're not cooking. Yeah, dude.
Pork chop sandwiches.
Shelby's busting out all the clips today for you guys.
So that's what happens. Try to cook. Your mom's not around, but
and knowing is half the battle.
That's it. No one's half the battle. All right, so you want to try and get into this a little bit?
Yeah, let's get into it. We've got 10, 12 people watching right now. Let's hit the like button there, and let's get into learning a little bit more about the direct business.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, like, comment, subscribe. If you're catching us on the rewind, comment down below if you like, what you like, didn't like. We're always wanting to improve. Let us know some topics you might want to hear about and such. We're always looking for new topics. We have, oh my God, we probably got a list of 12 or so in the can, in our lineup right now. And, we've been pretty good, working ahead on a couple of things. So, but definitely, if you're not subbed me up and you haven't subbed up Jeff, we alternate. So this week will be on my channel. Next week will be on Jeff's. So let's talk a little bit about the direct market. So, little origin story. So the direct market, of course, we need to talk a little bit about comics on the newsstands. And, newsstand comics, that was the way it was done for over 50 years. Deals were in place that unsold books would be picked up by distributors, and newsstands be given credit for unsold books. Comics were cheap to print, so companies always printed more than they sold. Some estimates state that about 30% of sell-through rate, but it's probably more around 80%. Companies aren't dumb. They're not going to print, hundreds of thousands more than what they think they're going to sell. So it was not uncommon that some of these books had print runs in the million. For example, Captain Marvel had in the 40s and early 50s millions, print runs in the millions, and they sold through on those. So, but definitely the system was broken. And if we kind of look at the model here, and interject anytime, Jeff, if I'm going too fast, some of you want to point out.
Sure. No, you're doing great, man.
But the model that everybody worked under was you had the publisher, the printer, so like Marvel, DC, Archie was your primary ones from the 50s and 60s. You had a national distributor that put the comic books out to what was called independent distributor wholesalers, or IDs. These were your local distributors that physically took the books off pallets, loaded them in trucks, and took them to newsstands, pharmacies, candy stores, things like that, which are the retailers. So to understand how the direct market began, look a little bit at the birth of comic stores. So comic shops were mainly bookstores, that just had a large collection or an area for comics. And these began appearing in the mid-60s, mainly in California and New York City. And these were in no particular order or anything. These were some of the ones that are probably most known in history, which is Cherokee Bookshop in Hollywood, Collector's Bookstore in Hollywood, Argosy Comic Shop in Hollywood. And what's great about this is they actually produced the very first price guide in 1965. So that was 7 years before Overstreet. And I've actually seen one of those, and it's pretty amazing to hold that and see it in your hands. Victory Thrift Shop, Robert Bell, which the image there on the side with Thor, you've probably seen that in older comic books. That's Robert Bell. He's been around since the early 60s. The one at the bottom there, the image is a comic collector shop, which is, I think, the collector bookstore, if I'm not mistaken. Seven Sons Comic Shop, Comic World. And then a lot of people know about this person, Pop Hollinger, in Concordia, Kansas. He actually started putting out comics at his flea market in the early 1940s. Some say around 1938, 1939. He started selling comic books. And you can actually find these, and they're actually a bit desirable, but to help strengthen the binding of comic books, he took brown tape and put brown tape along the spine of every single comic book that he sold. And, today we just think that's horrible, but those books now, if you actually have a Pop Hollander book that has that brown tape on it, it's worth a little more than your average book. So,
yeah, that's a piece of history. That's better than a store stamp you're going to see in there. I mean, who knows? In PGX, that's still probably a 9.8. So,
exactly. Yeah.
To everyone in the chat, I gotta say, call out to everyone in the chat. You guys are doing a great job. You're cracking me up.
I can't see it. I'm reading off the things I can't see. Oh man. All right, and then San Francisco Comic Book Company, which is going to come up later because we're going to talk about underground comics in a later episode.
Yep.
And that is where the birth of underground comics. That's where Zap was first sold, was San Francisco Comic Book Company. So we'll definitely be getting into that and Robert Crumb and such.
Yeah, this all ties together. When we're talking about the 1960s up to like the early 80s was such a transitional time for comic books. And in this market, and it's such a key points where Marvel and DC almost went out of business. You got the direct going, you got the variants, you got them trying to figure out how to go direct, and if they can. There's just so much that's going on in this time that again we'll break out in a little different pieces. How Star Wars saved Marvel Comics. I mean, it's just really crazy. All these things that happen in such a small window of time that we get to kind of piece apart. And like I said, they may not all be an hour long, half an hour episodes. We may take a couple of pieces and put them all into one. But there's just a lot of history packed in just like a couple of decades right now.
Yeah, definitely. So we have to talk about the birth of Comic Cons. Comic Cons began in the early 60s. The earliest one I could find was Chi-Con in 1961. Yep. But the first National Comic Con was held in New York City in 1964. And these were actually called comic art shows, was the original names to those. They didn't really become Comic Cons or called comic conventions until the early 70s. And one of the big people in New York was a guy named Phil Suling. He was an English teacher, and he began organizing monthly comic book shows and was part of the large yearly New York show, and became friends with many comic publishers, like with Marvel and DC. And it was Phil that actually went to DC's editor-in-chief at the time, Carmine Infantino, and proposed a direct distribution model for comic specialty shops. And then once he got DC on board, he just went across the street to Goodman at Marvel, and the rest is pretty much history with that. So,
yeah.
Anything? Yeah.
Yeah, Phil obviously, is a huge comic fan, but he's also a really good businessman when it comes down to it. He knows, and this was a perfect storm that kind of happened at this point in time, because prior to this, that's when you're starting to see the decline of comic sales in normal newsstand outlets. Sorry, you hear my dog barking back there. He's feeling much better. So if everyone knows from before, he went through some surgery. And he's obviously feeling really good right now. Looking back through there, you've had the decline of newsstand sales. You have DC slashing their titles by like 30, 40%. They're what's up, Cheddar Duck? They've got TV is becoming real big. So now they're losing a lot of their fan base, and there's a lot of kids. They're losing that to TV. And the way they're kind of trying to solve this is they're increasing the price. So almost every year, like clockwork, the price keeps going higher and higher, which causes more people to leave. And it's just kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of, hey, their sales are going down. And then Phil shows up almost like this white knight and saying, listen, these comic shops are starting to pop up around, we don't need to return them. They're starting to see some backstock business going on. They're holding some of this stuff. Why don't you give us a really good deal? We won't return them. And then you just sell us direct all the stuff and don't have to worry about it anymore. And that was just a godsend to Marvel and DC. They're like, wait, our sales are going down. Our distribution points are going down. And you want us to create more distribution points and sell you so you take care of it all? I know I think we might talk about this in a couple minutes, but when we talk about the independent distributors, the IDs, they looked at comic books as, like, we don't want to deal with them. They're only making a few pennies because comics were so cheap back then. They're only making a couple pennies on a comic book when they're selling, Better Homes and Garden, and they're selling Playboys, and they're making a ton of money on that. And then, these comic books, who cares? If they get them, they get them. They're damaged. We don't care. It is what it is. So there's a lot of issues with the IDs that we'll talk about in a minute as well.
Yeah, and one of the books I'm reading this week, if you watch one of my videos, I just bought this comic shop, and this tells the history of comic shop, but also, like the author says in the first chapter, you can't really tell the history of comic shops without the history of direct market and understanding how that really impacted what we know of. Really, the direct market is now what we think of as pop culture, and the comic shop and that model all began with the direct distribution model. Comics didn't sell more than Playboys. No, they didn't. No,
I know, shocking, right?
shocking, right? So, but yeah, if y'all are a really big nerd like me, pick this up. It's so interesting. I love stuff like this.
See, Max, you come here, you hear things you never thought you would ever hear before.
All right, so the direct market. So,
Captain Ramos has got a quick question for you, Shelby.
Oh, yeah. What? Yeah. What?
Yeah, the biggest price drop was that from 35 to 60 cents. I think it went from 10. It was going up by 10, 15 cents a time. And then I don't know. Do you know if there was I don't think there was anything in between there, was there?
Yeah, I think there was 50 cents.
Oh, you're right. It was 50 cents.
I'm almost positive there's 50 cents.
Yeah, you're right.
So, but yeah, that was probably the biggest jump, was 35 cents to 50 cents. So, but yeah, Phil Suling with his girlfriend and business partner, Joni Levius, formed Seagate Distribution in Sparta, Illinois. Books were sold directly to specialty shops at large discounts, usually around 50% off, but could not be returned. And basically, they cut out what we were talking about a minute ago, that ID and the distribution model. So other distributing companies joined in and created a national network. Bud Plant was over on the East Coast, and actually Bud Plant, one of those stores I named off, was his store. I'd have to go back a couple of slides to remind myself what store it was. But one of those stores was actually his, and he actually went through like 3 different stores selling them. Capital City Distribution was the South, and then Seagate was the North and East Coast. And it was estimated that at the boom in the early 1990s, late 80s, that there's as many as 30 independent direct distributors in the market. And of course, today there's, I'm going to say 1, but that's a recent change we'll discuss too. Sadly, in around 1977 or so, Phil was sued by New Media Distribution, or RJAX Enterprises, as having a monopoly. Seagate was forced to break up its exclusive rights with publishers. So this is what led to other people being able to distribute comics. Thank you, Kat. And other distributors being able to come into the market. Was they said that Phil couldn't have exclusive contracts with, say, only Marvel or DC. All right, let me fix what the cat just did. Oh,
that's what happens on live.
It is.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they were in Southern Illinois, and that's why they were in Southern Illinois, because at the time, I think it was 80 or 90% of all printing publishing was done in Southern Illinois. Yeah. So that's kind of why they set up shop there. So it was easy for them to have access, and that's why they got the great shipping arrangements, because it was all already, the hub was already right there. So they had the built-in kind of infrastructure there.
Yeah. So RJAX ended up going out of business in 1982, and that became what we know of as Diamond Distribution. Diamond came around about that time, bought up a lot of RJAX. They also purchased Bud Plant when he decided to get out of distribution and go into mainly artwork. And through exclusive contracts with Marvel and DC, they forced Capital City to sell in 1995. So by about 1997, Diamond was the only distributor left. Marvel was purchased by Heroes World, or Marvel purchased Heroes World to distribute their own books, but after their bankruptcy in 1996-97, that ended that, and that's when Diamond took over everything, was in 97. Sadly, Phil Suling would die of a rare liver cancer in 1985 at only the age of 50. So would have loved to seen what he would have been able to do in the marketplace, and does one of the big reasons, So again, that's what I find interesting about history, right? Is you have just these things that happen in life that open things up for other possibilities, and Diamond becoming dominant.
Yeah.
So what's future?
Shutterduck wants to claim the cat. So
sorry, Shutter. I might. He just scratched my lip, so you might be able to.
Yeah. So for the just real quick on the IDs. Yeah. So to go back one slide there.
Yeah.
So one of the, if you want to call it, unintentional benefits of Seagate doing all this and bypassing IDs and being able to go direct is he was able to be very efficient because of the shipping infrastructure he had set up. And because the IDs didn't care about comic books, they were able to ship out comics a week before all the other newsstand places got it. So you were able to go to a comic book store and get the comic a week before you'd be able to see it at your local drugstore down the street. And what Chuck from Mile High, he was around during that time, and obviously he had his stores. He had a really cool statistic that showed that 70%, I think 70% of all of the sales, or 80% of all the sales, happened within the first 7 days. So when a new comic came out, you pretty much sell all you're going to sell in that 7 days. So these comic book stores were taking all this business away from the newsstands, which again, they were capturing a big market share of all this new comics there. The drugstores didn't really care a whole lot about these comics anymore. So those started going further down the drain for those newsstand issues, and it just forced more people going direct. So him going direct and being efficient at this really helped kind of really put gasoline on the fire of this whole comic boom of specialty stores popping up everywhere.
Yeah, and definitely, this is going to lead into our discussion of independent and underground books, right? Because once these specialty shops start opening up and they could carry more variety of books,
Right.
Guaranteed that your books are going to get there a week earlier than the newsstand, sometimes 2 weeks earlier than the newsstand. You have a consistent group of collectors that come in. Now you can start broadening your base, so to speak, and start catering to other independent books that normally would not ever have seen national distribution or recognition without the comic shop in the direct market. Trust me, there would not be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles today if you did not have the direct market model and specialty shops.
Yeah, these specialty shops were helping fuel the underground movement where they couldn't sell into the local drugstore down the street. So now they have this whole opportunity to be distributed. They can charge more. So now everyone's getting more money out of this thing, and they can, cater to that adult, audience that doesn't have to be geared towards kids anymore. It can be geared towards adults a little bit more. So it just kept opening up more and more. And then another problem that the IDs had, why they didn't even want to ship to comic book stores or specialty stores, is because of the back issue situation. With these comic stores, they weren't returning the products after the 30-day window. They were holding on to it, and they were going to sell for more money later down the road. Normal back issue stuff. They were worried about them returning things later. They either rip the cover off, you return it, you get credit for it. They were worried about this whole situation going on with these back issues, so they didn't even want to deal with it. So they actually they actively trying not to sell to a lot of comic book shops. So comic book shops were really kind of in need of someone like Seagate to come along and say, hey, we can help you out.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's very interesting to seeing how one thing leads to the other. And even with the expansion or boom, I'll use, of like the 30-something independent distributors, also in 1990, 1992, you had an estimated 10,000 comic book shops. Today, you have about 3,500 nationally. So if that tells you anything about how huge the market was, and it was definitely not sustainable, and
Right.
was set for a crash. So
Yep.
we'll talk. That's going to be an upcoming episode too. Is talk about the comic crash of the 1990s.
Yep. We got a couple of comments right now. Some questions going on. So Matt is asking about, was there quality assurance when getting books from so many distributors?
Back then, I'll speak from me of having owned a comic book store. We did not scrutinize every little tick on a comic book as much as we do today. So could you have gotten a dented corner? Could you have gotten a spine crease? Something like that? Yes, you could. Remember, the Overstreet didn't even give prices for anything above a 9.0 up until about 10 years ago in their price guide, because it just was not, near mint was near mint, and some defects were acceptable, and you knew that they were still near mint books. It's really when you get into CGC and slabbing, and then these minute grades of 9.2, 9.4, 9.6, 9.8, 9.9, that then it becomes an issue to people. So that's actually a new phenomenon. And I say new, meaning probably 10 to 15 years old of that being a concern.
All right. And that's a whole nother episode. We could do something on this whole new grading system, and what's the real difference between a 9.6 and 9.8. I mean, I know I've submitted stuff, have a 9.6 and submit it again, don't do anything, it comes back a 9.8.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and that's the marketplace we live in right now. It's the time we are. So,
yep.
We'll talk about more of that. We'll dig more about into that.
Yep.
Captain Ramos is asking, when did the bi-weekly books show up?
Bi-weekly. Give me an example. What's an example of bi-weekly? Trying to think of what comes out every 2 weeks.
I'm not sure. Captain, if you got an example, just drop it down right there, and we'll take a look at it. And if we don't have the answer for you now, we'll certainly look for it later.
Oh, now in the early 90s, yes, X-Men went bi-weekly for a short time in the early 90s, just because money. I mean, yeah. So X-Men did go bi-weekly for a couple of years in the early 90s. Superman, of course, went to 4 titles where you would have a different Superman title every week. Spider-Man did the same thing with the McFarlane Spider-Man. So you had a different Spider-Man title every week. But I can't think of any other books that were bi-weekly.
Yeah, just the main big ones, obviously, the drivers. But during that whole time, like you said, it was all about money and creating that big boom. That's when all the variant covers were coming out, and everyone was hoarding up, and you'd buy 5, 6, 7 copies of number ones that came out, and there was different, volumes that kept coming out. So there'd be more number ones that would come out, so people knew they would buy more number ones. So yeah, I bought Eclipse comics when they were bi-weekly. Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Like they only shipped every 2 weeks instead of every week? Or there was a certain title that was bi-weekly?
I think there was a certain title, if I remember. Captain, let us know. I think there was certain titles that were shipping bi-weekly.
Oh, yeah, I might have blown out them brain cells since the 80s.
Okay, moving on.
All right, so our last slide here. So what's the future of comic book distribution? So we've seen companies recently, very recently, like last month, splitting with Diamond and forming relationships with other distributors. There's also more to push by stakeholders in large companies. Remember, like DC is actually owned by AT&T. And DC has been the main one pushing for them to adopt a virtual comic book model. There's been a lot of discussion of that with DC primarily. And then print just in general, it's been slowly dying over the past couple of decades. So where does this leave the comic book market? I think it's a very open question of what will the comic book market look like in 10 years or 20 years down the road? I might not be here to see it, but
you're still young.
Max and other people will be. So
yeah, no, definitely. And everyone just comment down below as well as what you think the comic industry is going to look like in the next 10 years. It is going to be pretty interesting, with Diamond breaking up right now, with digital comics growing a little bit more. I remember when digital comics first started getting out there, and everyone thought, that's it. It's the end of comics. It's the end of print. We're not going to have any more. Everything's going to be digital. And obviously that didn't happen. Sure, there's digital is still a little more popular and getting more popular, but there's always going to be people that want that, about touch it. They want to smell it. They like the actual comic. Although with some of the comics now and the grading systems and all the, speculating that's going on, people just want to buy a slab and they don't even want to look at the comic anymore. So it's really more of an investment, almost like a stock, or a baseball card kind of thing. We're all model train collectors now.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I was just watching, Reggie just dropped a video about an hour before us where he had gotten some inside information from a couple of people that basically they feel that they're going to be able to start handling customers better now that Marvel is not Marvel does not have them as a primary distributor. They actually kind of blamed Marvel because they said due to the high volume of Marvel titles that they have to hold in their warehouse and distribute, that prevented them from being able to do things like proper quality control, updating of software, and things like that. So I think it's kind of funny how they're making a spin on this.
Yeah, they're blaming them, but didn't Diamond shut down, I think, their Memphis facility, one of the biggest facilities when they had Marvel? So I don't know how you can blame them saying, hey, you're taking too much of a room, but you just shut down one of your biggest distribution centers.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I'm with everyone in the chat right here. Print comics, it's never going to go away. And I don't want to see it going away, and I don't think it ever will.
No. Now, DC did talk about releasing 4 titles digitally that were going to be brand new stories. You'd still get the paper copies, but these would be new stories you could only get digitally in order to test the digital market. And that was Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and maybe the Flash or Green Lantern or something like that.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see them releasing digitally only comics to test it out to see how it works. I mean, there's been a couple of those, especially indie comics. They've done that already. So that model's out there, and that's cool if you want to test it. I personally, I don't think it's going to get any traction. It's going to go anywhere for that, but it's cool to try things different out because you got to evolve with the times. If that's where the eyeballs are and that's where your customers want, you can't sit back and let all the indie titles beat you on that. You're the big boys in the room. You got to do that, but. Max and everyone is saying in here that the indie titles are crushing it right now. You look at Marvel and DC, and a lot of times they're spinning their wheels and they're playing catch up. Boom and Dark Horse and Scout and all these indie comics right now, publishers, they're putting out some really good stories. They're attracting all the artists over there. They're attracting all the good writers. No matter how much Marvel and DC try and tie these guys up on contracts, they always make sure they've got at least they can go out and do a limited series indie, and it's growing more and more in that. So I definitely think that it's going to keep going that way. And they like Matthew said, they learned a lot of lessons in that pop from the 90s that I see a lot of the same mistakes they're doing, but it's a little bit different. So I think they're going to survive, obviously, this whole change of everything, but yeah, it's really interesting time again. Now we got all the new money and speculation coming into this market. It'll pop eventually, but we'll be there to buy up all the comics for cheap.
Well, and that's what people are worried about, right? Because they are looking back at the 90s as the roadmap of a crash being oncoming is you have. We were saying the same things back in the late 80s, early 90s. Oh, Marvel and DC's putting out crap. Independent books is the best ones out there. They have the best stories. They have the best. We were saying the same thing back then.
Sure.
Okay, in the 90s, man. We were saying the same thing. We saw freaking prices go crazy in the early 90s. You're seeing the same thing right now. You saw Marvel and DC pumping out more books than ever, and you're seeing the same thing now, and that's what people are afraid of, is they're seeing some of the same road signs as what led to the crash in 95 today. Low quality, high but a high quantity books being put out by the two big publishers, independent, freaking killing it and having the best stories and creation.
Even their paper quality is better.
Yeah, creativeness. And you're seeing a huge increase in prices, and you're seeing speculators come in.
Right. Well, like the 90s, they're creating comics specifically for speculating and collecting as opposed to reading and enjoyment. That's why you get a million variants out there, and you've got eight printings of stuff coming out so they can get more money. And no matter how many Berserker comics they run, there's going to be another printing of it. So it's crazy when you start noticing they're making comics for speculating and not for the actual readers. That's when there's something that's going to pop eventually. But like everyone's saying, it's going to be on a smaller scale. They've definitely toned it down a little bit. And you got different things like Kickstarter even, have changed the concept a little bit of creating a comic book. And even you're seeing, Boom Studios and some of these independent guys just using Kickstarter as a way. So there's no risk for them, and they're putting out stuff that way too.
Yeah. And I've shown on my channel a couple of Kickstarters that I've supported. That had some really good, art or creative teams. Speaking to Matthew, you're right, is the big difference in the 90s and today is you don't see the volume, because back then you were seeing 6 million copies of X-Men #1, 3 million copies of Spider-Man #1, things like that. Okay. A huge quantity today is, around 50,000 copies, right? That's a huge, print run. Except for, of course, Batman and Spider-Man, they're always over 100,000, but those are your two pinnacles.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the Comic-Con and it says low print run for Marvel and it's 30,000, 40,000. Like if you're at 30, 40,000, that's a low print run. And most of these independent comics don't even touch that number. Some of their #1s are, 8 to 10,000 you can get out. And you've got, which is a whole nother episode we can do, is all of the boom of, the MCU and Netflix and Amazon, coming out, and they've got these exclusive deals with a lot of the independent companies that say, as soon as you make something, hey, if it's popular, we're going to turn it into a TV show. We're going to turn it into a movie. And that's just feeding all this stuff. And, I was mentioning this before at the live show that the live auction that we did yesterday. So if anyone hasn't checked that out, Wild Comics Unboxing did his first, live auction on there. I was on there, Matthew was on there, and Duffy and everyone. So we had a fun time doing that. But we're talking about some of this stuff where it's just amazing how quickly they're pumping things out right now, and making it a TV show, making it a movie. And these big studios love it. They've got this built-in idea studio for them, just pumping out all this content.
Yeah. Hi, Doc Cobb Comics. I see you, buddy. Glad you could join us. Yeah, back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, if you had a book that dropped below 50,000, then it got canceled. Like I said, 50,000 is now considered a high mark for a
friggin' Disney. What do you say? What do you think? It's about time to do a giveaway?
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Let's do a giveaway. Let's give the people what they want.
That's right. All right. I'll go first. So since wait a minute. We have, we care about our viewers too. So we're going to need to do a public service announcement.
Is your mom there?
No, I'm home alone.
Well, you won a prize. What's your address?
42 Oak Street. Hey, Roblox, some stranger's bringing me a prize.
A stranger, huh? All he wanted to bring you was trouble. Remember, never tell anyone you're home alone and never give anyone your address.
I'll say Mom can't come to the phone.
Smart thinking.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Yes! I love it. Love those old Joes.
That's right. Knowing is half the battle. So, all right. So for my giveaway tonight, for PSAs, I'm going to give away this very, very beautiful copy of G.I. Joe Yearbook #1.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, we'll be giving this away tonight. And I'm going to throw in some extra stuff, too. This is only about a $10 comic book. But, it's definitely not Hama and Lynn Wein artwork. So it's really cool. So we've been talking about the distribution market. And Marvel, what was Marvel's very first direct-only comic book?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. You might have to give a hint on that one. I don't know.
I don't know.
Now, start line. We got the start line down.
Start line. So what was Marvel's? Okay, Sean Miller. Dazzler. Yes, Dazzler #1 was Marvel's very first.
Wow. I thought it was going to take a while.
I thought it might too, but so Sean, hit me up over on IG and with your address and stuff, and I'll get this sent out to you and a few other little goodies. So
awesome. Good job, Sean. Appreciate it. X-Collect. Hey, buddy. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you coming by and giving us some love, man. All right. So for my giveaway, I want to do something around the same time. So we're talking in this really 1976, 1979 time frame. And if anyone saw the auction last night, I was actually selling a couple of Tomb of Draculas with Blade on there. So again, hot comic right now. This is a lower grade, obviously.
But I'll make you. Oh my God!
Drag me over.
That is not what I wanted to do.
Hey, there you go.
I actually double clicked.
Double click. So 1976, Tomb of Dracula. So right before the start of the direct market right there. So going off of this, I hope you were taking notes. No, this is actually different. So
this is the quiz time of the show.
The question, this one is pretty simple, is what's Blade's name?
Ooh.
So I don't know if you have to do a start line for that one.
Yes, we could do a start line for the
Pop quiz. Keanu Reeves style, Berserker style. What is Blade's name?
Ooh. Besides bad mother.
It is not Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, it's not Wesley Snipes.
Although those movies were good. Those Wesley Snipes, I like
those were good. Those were good.
Yep, we got an Eric Brooks coming through there. Who do you got as first on your side?
Oh gosh, they all came in really quick.
Yeah, I got Sean on my side.
Sean again?
Sean again?
No,
is that who you see?
Not Sean again. Sean Miller.
All right, Sean.
Wow, hey. 2 for 2, buddy.
Awesome. Hit me up on IG and get me information. I'll get this out to you. I appreciate it. Max, you were close. You came in like a split second after that.
Oh, yeah. Sean's got that faster internet. So,
yeah. And talking about all this direct, and we start talking about, well, what were the first direct comics out there? We know Dazzler was the first one Marvel made for direct, but when in 1977, when Seagate started putting all the stuff direct, which they were also publishing stuff too. Bud was publishing stuff, but that time frame in 1977, there was a whole series of them, basically by Whitman, who was distributing. So you heard the whole Whitman variants that's out there. Those were the first direct comics that were made, and we're going to talk about that in the next episode. So next week on my channel, so make sure you subscribe over on Hard to Come By. So go over to Hard to Come By, subscribe to that one. We're going to be talking about the Whitman variants and the significance of that, and they're not all reprints, and it's a really interesting time frame. Again, that small little window of things that were happening. But yeah, that's going to be a fun one that we're going to dive into, and we're going to go into some of the numbers of what some of the actual sales mean. So it's going to be kind of a cool one on that side, because I know we didn't have the show me the money on this particular video, but the next video, that's going to be the next one.
Yeah, so for the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing, of course, like Jeff just said, next week we'll be discussing Whitman variants and how that came about, and its relationship, really its relationship with the direct market. I mean, what we think of as what books we designate as direct copies, really comes from Whitman, I feel. So we'll be talking about that. And then coming up, probably our most requested one so far is direct versus newsstand. So I've been pulling together a lot of numbers. I'm bringing y'all some statistics. I'm going to bring y'all some statistics that night, and it should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that by far is going to be the most controversial topic, I guess you want to call it. Besides mentioning Playboy and Better Homes and Garden in the same sentence, it's newsstand versus direct.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that might be a little bit longer episode that we're going to do, but yeah, that's going to be a fun one. So I'm excited that all the stuff we've already put together, man, it's going to be fun. So what else you got closing up here?
I don't know what you got going on this week. So, like I said, I'm in the process of reading this right now. So this is my reading material.
See, that's what we bring you. We're the Cliff Notes of the comic shops for you. So you don't have to read the book. You just come here and listen to Shelby, and we'll get it all from you.
Yeah. And I haven't had a chance to watch these yet. So I did just get this. Will Eisner.
Oh, nice.
Portrait of a Sequential Artist. And what's interesting is in the special features, Will Eisner did a lot of one-on-one interviews. And one of the one-on-one interviews he did was with Phil Suling. So I'm really interested in hearing that. But he did a lot of one-on-one interviews with people like Jack Kirby, Harvey Kurtzman, Milton Caniff, Neil Adams, Gil Kane, Joe Kubert, Joe Simon, C.C. Beck, Gil Fox. So
that's awesome. And Shutterduck, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's on our list. We're going to do an episode talking about exclusives. We're going to talk about price variants. We're going to talk about second and third prints and how to identify them, fourth prints and price variants, Canadian price variants, all that kind of stuff. But if you guys have any more suggestions, always type them in there. You can shoot any of us a direct message. And if anyone's got a lot of knowledge in a certain topic, reach out to us, and we can certainly talk about doing more. We want to bring more people in the community around here. So anything that we can do to help out and help support you guys and build the community up. And again, we're just two guys like talking about this stuff. So if you're here doing the same thing, then we love you. We want you to come on board and come on in, and we can definitely support you and just bring you on board and talk about it.
Yeah, we'll be having some special guests come in. I'm working on I'm working on one important guest for the independent discussion. So I'm kind of keeping that under the hat right now till I can get confirmation.
Special guests for you, man. Giveaways. We do something great every week.
Special guest. You're welcome, Max. I'm so happy and I appreciate the business. So another thing I haven't had a chance to watch is I got this Space Ghost and Dino Boy. But
are those the original ones?
This is not the original Space
Okay.
Ghost, but the reason I got it is in the special feature, it has a documentary, The Life and Art of Alex Toth.
Okay.
So
I thought you were going to say there's one of those mini comic books in there that you're going to send to CGC.
no. Again, it's just, me as a freaking geek, right? Is that, I love watching these documentaries. I love hearing these interviews. I love hearing about history. So, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what I remember when I was going to the grocery store as a kid, and that's when they have all those VHS tapes lined up of the old Captain America, Thor, Submariner cartoons. And then they started coming out with later ones, like I mentioned before in one of our other shows. Todd McFarlane did the one with Stan Lee and Rob Liefeld, and that's when they created Overkill, which later turned into Overkill. But though I love those old kind of documentaries and those interviews that they're talking about this stuff. So I think it's pretty cool. And I used to love the Space Ghost TV series. I don't know if anyone saw that, where he actually had his own talk show.
Yeah, Space Ghost, Coast to Coast.
Coast to Coast.
That was great.
I love those.
Yeah. One thing I was reading in this is Robert Bell that we just discussed. He is the inventor of the comic book bag. So what he used to do was,
really?
Yeah, he used to go to dry cleaners and get the bags they put over clothes for dry cleaning, and he would cut them out and then use tape to tape up two corners, and that's what he put his comic books in. And then they became so popular that he finally found someone that would produce bags for him, and they were called Bell bags. And I remember back in the 80s buying Bell bags. So yeah, Robert Bell ended up selling his comic book market and going into producing bags, and made a bunch of money, and freaking lives down in, I don't know, Key West or something. So
I didn't know. I'm sure he probably had a patent on it or something. That's something I did not know.
Yeah. They always say the only people that really made money in the 90s was people producing bags and boards.
Yeah, very true. Very true. All right.
So that is it. Unless y'all have got anything, last chance for any final comments. I used to use the grocery fruit and vegetable bags. And I actually bought a small collection from a guy. When he sent them to me, they were still in the grocery fruit bags that he had gotten in the 70s. So that's funny.
Yeah, I used to do my parents had a business back then, and they would always do flyers, and they'd put them on everyone's door. So they had those plastic little bags with the hole in the middle that they can hang on the doorknob. So they put the flyer in there and put it on there. And I used to take those and I put my comic books in those. And that's what I used for my bags back in the day.
Yeah, I actually used wax paper a lot. I would take a stack and then kind of put wax paper around them. And I had this trunk that I had purchased, and I took comic books and I kind of like the background image. I sliced out a whole bunch of comic scenes and taped it to this big trunk.
Oh.
And that was my comic book trunk, and that's what I kept my comic books in,
Wait, so you're trying to preserve your comics, you're putting wax paper, you're doing all this stuff, and you said, you know what? I'm going to cut up one of the comic books now.
Yeah, cut up the back. Yeah, the ones I didn't like, So I would cut them up and tape all
That's
the
awesome.
So,
all right. Thank you guys. It's been an hour that we've been on here. We appreciate you sticking around this whole time, hitting that like button, subscribing to both of us. Again, appreciate you sharing everything, Max and Glitter and Matthew, Sean, Captain Ramos. Thank you all for coming by. Again, any questions, anything else you have for us, certainly let us know. And again, we appreciate you guys being here, just hanging out, just talking comics.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, guys. Catch us next Monday. And remember, we're doing peace, love, and comics. Thank you all.